welcome back to the IQ Answers podcast. This is Dana Markser. I am the CEO and founder of IQ, and this podcast is where we talk to all kinds of brilliant minds in the B2B SaaS space around go-to-market strategy and growth and rev off. So today I have Eric Dickmann with me. Eric, it is great to have you on. I've really been looking forward to this call because we met and we had a great conversation, and I love where your philosophy goes. So excited for you to share it with us. So
Thanks,
welcome.
Dana. Well, thanks, Dana. I'm excited to be here. Thanks so much for the invitation to speak today.
Great. Well, let me just give our audience a quick intro. So we are talking today about something a lot of companies are wrestling with right now. So how to actually execute great marketing strategy when your team is tiny and your to-do list is enormous. So we're talking, Eric, about your 10-80-10 rule, how small marketing teams execute big strategies with AI. So love this, and I know that it's going to be a popular topic. So um, you have a framework that addresses this problem. You're the founder of the Five Echelon Group and a fractional CMO who helps B2B technology, SaaS, and professional services companies turn what he calls random acts of marketing into predictable growth engines. So that's what we're all about. He's also the host of the Virtual CMO podcast and works closely with leadership teams to align strategy, sales, and modern marketing systems, including smart use of AI. So today we are talking about your 10-80-10 AI framework, which is a way for small marketing teams to dramatically increase output without losing the human strategy and creativity that actually drives results. So Eric, again, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Great. So let's first talk a little bit about the problem that you see most often. So you work with a lot of companies as a fractional CMO. So what is this? What is the most common disconnect that you see, between what marketing plans and what actually gets executed?
It's interesting, Dana. As you said, being a fractional CMO, I get the pleasure of working with a lot of companies, small companies all the way up to big enterprise companies. And it really doesn't matter what size company you are. I've seen this problem throughout all of them. And really what it is we start out the beginning of the year, we create this exciting marketing strategy. We're very excited to put it into practice. And then things start happening that chip away at it. Maybe you don't get the budget that you need to be able to fully execute that strategy. Maybe you don't get that new hire that you really needed to be able to support some aspect of it. Or maybe somebody leaves the team or a vendor relationship goes sour and you no longer have the support of that agency partner. And what I see is these grand marketing plans that start out with so much promise don't get the execution that they need throughout the year to actually deliver the results that they were designed to produce. I was scrolling through social media the other day and a meme came up that I thought was a perfect example of it. And it was three pictures. And the first picture was this beautiful luxury yacht and it said marketing strategy. And then there was this picture of a rubber raft and it was labeled marketing budget. And then underneath both was this cruise ship liner, and it was expectations of marketing. And I think that's oftentimes what happens is the strategy tries to be realistic in what you can do, maybe hoping that you'll get a little bit of extra budget or resource. The reality is you never get all of what you want. Maybe you get far less resource than you need, but the expectations grow even beyond what you had originally projected. And that's what I see happening in so many companies today, especially smaller ones.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And I mean, I've been around the CMO role for enough years to know that the investment and the budget that I mean it you see this pendulum swing, right? And what tactics are going to be the most payoff? How do you measure that? And certainly AI is having a dramatic impact.
For sure.
So let's get to this 10-80-10 framework. So introduce us to your framework.
Yeah, so the 10-80-10 framework, it's been a framework that has been used throughout time. I think it was attributed to Steve Jobs at some point under a different set of circumstances, but it's a framework that I feel is very applicable now that we're really getting into this AI age. And it's really what you want to do is, upfront, you really want to develop a strategy, and that's where you should be putting a lot of your effort. You should be using your skills, your knowledge about the business, what you understand are the unique value propositions of that business to define what it is you want your marketing program to accomplish. And then in the middle, you want to leverage these tools to the maximum extent to get the most productivity you can out of them. And then at the end, you want to take that output from all of these tools and really curate it, really be the editor of whatever the output is from these marketing tools. So you're what it really changes, instead of marketing being largely a creative set of assets, a creative set of skills, it's now becoming what are you inputting and what are you getting out and how are you editing it and optimizing it and letting these AI tools do the brunt of that work in the middle.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it's so key. I mean, I see this all the time is, we certainly use generative AI to do marketing content here and there, but it's never correct when it comes out the first
That's
time.
right. That's right.
And it depends on what you tell it to write in the beginning, right? So you have to give it this unique perspective, because if you just say write me something like this, it's going to say everything everybody else is saying, right? So you really have to have a going in position and really talk about the nuance ahead of time. And I think that's your first 10%. And then when it comes out, it's like, you got it, maybe, but
That's
this
right.
isn't right and this isn't right. So help us. Let's start at the first 10%. So walk us through that in a little bit more detail.
Yeah. So, one of the analogies that I like to use is, think of setting up a dating profile on some dating website. You may give it information about how tall you are, what you weigh, how old you are, what colors your hair, what are your hobbies, what are your interests, and things like that. And so largely it gets a high level understanding of who you are as a person and tries to match you with others, right? But if you look at that and you look at that profile, you say, well, that's not me. That's just a couple of facts and figures about me. And when you think about AI looks at that dating profile, right? It looks at some facts and figures about your company, your products, and your services, but it doesn't understand the nuance. It doesn't understand the people in the company, what they do, what their level of expertise is, how do they interact with prospects, what's the culture of the company, what's really your voice, how do prospects respond when they hear about your offerings, how does the sales team work with marketing, how does executive leadership work with sales. All of these internal dynamics are things that AI just really doesn't understand. And even if you thought hard about it and how you could maybe put that in a document to upload for it to get some sense, it would never really understand the nuances of it. And AI, I don't think, at least for the foreseeable future, it's not going to be present in every meeting, in every water cooler conversation, at every trade event and whatnot. There's always going to be some dynamics that it really doesn't understand about your business, how you sell, how your organization operates. And that's really where I think this first 10% comes in. You are really trying to guide a strategy. You can pick up a marketing 101, a marketing for dummies a book at the store, right? And it's going to list a handful of tactics, and you can put them all in a hat and pull some out. And, largely you'll have somewhat of a marketing strategy. Marketing is not a secret, but
Mhm.
how you apply marketing to your specific business is. And that's really what strategy is all about. It's how to take this toolkit that you have of all these different marketing tactics and apply them uniquely to your business problems and your unique set of customers that you're targeting. And that's where strategy comes in. And that's something that I don't think AI can duplicate. That's where that first 10% really matters.
Yeah, yeah. And have I'm sure folks out there that know me, there are a million great things to do in marketing. The question is, what are the most important things to do?
Right.
Right. And so with marketing teams, and especially, when you have really great creative minds on your team, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's wonderful. You want to say something different. But it's trying to stay in the lane too. And
That's
so
right.
that's where I think this architecture is so critical. And especially, I'd love to get your thoughts. There's a big difference when you're looking at a marketing strategy, especially your positioning, when you are selling, a time entry system versus creating a new market,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
And so those are very different things. One, you're asking AI to position your company against what is already known out there.
That's right.
And the other one is AI doesn't even know what it is out there that's going to replace what you're doing, right?
That's right.
What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think that's kind of getting into value proposition, right? And really, what I see, especially with a lot of technology companies, is they love to talk about what their products do, the
Hmm.
features and functions. They can talk all day about that. They're less competent, I think, in talking about what problems they solve and why they maybe solve them in a way that is unique and different than their competitors are solving them. And so they spend a lot of time really on table stakes and not enough time on differentiators. And I think you're exactly right. The AI will understand the table stakes. They will
Hmm.
understand what's out there. They're pooling from a broad pool of knowledge about what they see kind of globally happening, not what's specifically happening in your business. And I think to truly differentiate your business from the competition, you need to really understand deeply what your customers' pain points are, how you're uniquely solving them in a way that can move the needle, as opposed to just your feature is better than competitor X, Y, or Z's
Hmm.
feature, right?
And I'll tell you, and this is where you're so critical, Eric, is Um, I was in marketing for B2B tech companies for a couple decades. And, I could go in, I could step in and I could see, how we needed to move from the product orientation to, what problem are we solving? Get out of what your product does, get out of how you want to sell it, get out of how you want to price it, and look at what your problem you're solving, who you're solving it for, why they care, and how do they want to buy it,
Right.
right? That is so critical. Now, when I founded my own software company, I am the worst person to try to even do that,
Yep.
right? Because I, I created a product that, I needed for 2 decades of being in a go-to-market leadership role. And I'm like, everybody needs this. And I am so into the weeds of the functionality and in love with our algorithms. And,
Yep.
my baby is beautiful. And
Yep.
I have fired myself from any marketing marketing position because I cannot see it anymore.
You get very close to it. And I think that a lot
Hmm.
of founder-led companies, that's exactly what happens. It's their baby, right? They're very close to it. They know what went into the development of it. Sometimes they're solving really hard problems. And
Hmm.
you just want to pound your fists on the table and say, don't you understand this was a really hard problem to solve? But to the customer, to the end user, they just want the problem solved. They're not so interested in how you solved it. They just want that problem solved.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Critical. I love it. So now let's get into this 80% part of it because I think a lot of folks are challenged with this. Everybody's like, how am I using AI? What am I going to do with it? So give us your perspective on that, especially for small teams.
Yeah. So, first of all, put the disclaimer out there. I'm not so sure that we can get to 80% today, but it's coming. I think in certain specific roles, you look at software engineers and coding. I mean, these AI tools are transforming that that position, right? I would not want to be a graduate right now coming into the workforce with a software engineering degree, right? Because it's just changed so much. And if you've ever used Claude and you've tried to get it to do a website or something for it, and you watch it writing lines of code, it's spectacularly good at that. I think as you get into marketing, especially with some more creative things, the AI is not quite there yet, but it's getting there. You talked about writing before. I think it's getting pretty good at writing. Yeah, it's not necessarily going to deliver you a final draft, but it's going to get you 80% of the way there. And one of the things that I think is the biggest bottleneck to content creation, which if you look at a lot of what marketing does, it's all about content, right? If you look
Hmm.
at one of the biggest bottlenecks, it's that marketing is generally not the store of institutional knowledge about your products and services. They they're not the product marketers or the product engineers or the salespeople that are out there interacting with clients. They get a lot of that secondhand, third hand information, but they're asked to sell this stuff in the marketplace by putting together content that explains what all this stuff does. So oftentimes, what marketers have to do is they have to say, "Hey, Dana, can you write us a blog post on this great new thing that we just developed for our product?" And you're like, "Sure, I'll get around to it, right?" And so it sits
Hmm.
on the desk for weeks.
Classic.
Right, it just sits there. It doesn't get done. And in the meantime, all of these other marketing processes are stopped because that piece of content may have been the key to a whole campaign that marketing was getting ready to launch. And
Hmm.
so what I generally think is a real accelerator, even with the state of AI tools today, is don't start out with a blank piece of paper. Don't ask somebody, an executive leader, a product manager, something like that, to write an article. Give them an article that's
Hmm.
80% there.
Hmm.
Pull as much information that you can. Maybe you take a webinar that they were on or something that they had previously written or a sales deck or something, and you give the AI this information and say, construct an article on whatever topic. And yeah, it's
Hmm.
going to have some holes in it. It's not going to be complete, but now you're giving somebody something to react to as opposed to something that they need to create from scratch. And I think this is a huge mindset shift for marketers is they have to stop being in the mindset of being the creators and being more the cultivators of the content that they want created. And whether they're using
Hmm.
AI to do that or they're bringing in thought leaders within the company, it's how can they speed up the process of extracting that knowledge, getting that content in a state where they can then put on their editing hat and say, now I just need to polish this up.
Hmm.
And I think that is going to be huge because these tools are getting better every day. And I think that is one of them. I think the other thing is content repurposing. If you take something like you've done a webinar, one of my favorite tools to use is HubSpot. I think it's a great platform. And they have a feature in called Content Remix, which is, their early effort to really embed AI in the marketing workflow. And you could say, I'm going to take the transcript of this podcast and I'm going to put it into this remix tool. And then I'm going to say, I want you to create a blog post from this. I want you to create 3 social media posts from it. I want you to create an email sequence for people who didn't attend the webinar but can watch the replay. And you stick that one piece of content in there and it goes off and generates 5, 6, 7 pieces of other content from that one. Again, they still need to be polished. They may need a little bit of work. Maybe you need to put an image in the social media post that it didn't create or it created one you didn't like. But now think of the time if you would have done all of that work manually. That's a big chunk of time that it's now saved. And I think that's the direction that we're going in being able to feed the AI the right kind of information to get that solid first draft out that somebody can respond to. And then that generally is what takes the bulk of the time.
Yeah, I love that. And you are broadening the capacity of your thought leaders in your company when you do that,
That's right.
right? Because they are getting pulled in so many different directions. And and I love what you said, even getting the transcript of a presentation that they did, or I mean, there are so many sources now that you can get easily to be able to put into these engines and have these assets cranked out. And you're not only gonna get your marketing content, but your executives are gonna love you, right? Because
That's
it's
right.
not, I don't have any more time on my calendar for the interview, right? So yeah, those days I think are mostly gone. If teams are properly using AI at this point.
Well, and everything, before we started our Zoom call today, right? It asked if we wanted the AI companion to launch and transcribe it. There's just so many opportunities to capture this now that you don't have to reserve time on an executive's calendar just to
Hmm.
get some information. You can just say, hey, record this meeting that you're going to be in and then send it to me, and I can use this as the basis for some content.
Hmm. Yep. I love that. Okay, so we've gone through the 10, you got to have your strategy. The 80, how do you leverage AI to expand capacity for the especially for these small teams? Now let's get to the what's the last 10?
The last end is really editing and curating, right? We have to shift this mindset from being pure content creators to being more curators of content. And one of the biggest mistakes that I think a lot of teams have made is they don't do that upfront part. They put in a very simple query into one of these AIs, and surprisingly, the AI spits back a lot of content, and you look and say, wow, I hardly put anything in, and I got this great long article back. And maybe it's okay, right? But is okay the standard? Is okay what you're looking for? It's
Hmm.
like if you go to the department store and you buy a suit off the rack, right? It fits, it's in your size, right? But is that the same as having it tailored and having it fit specifically to you so that it really matches your unique style, your unique look? And I think that's what this curation process, this optimization process is really about. It's really shifting this mindset between I've got to write everything from scratch to now I have to look at the draft of what I'm getting and how can I really put our company's unique value proposition? How can I make sure it's aligned with our brand voice? How does this really look like it's coming from us or the leader that I'm ghostwriting for or whatever it may be? Because as AI becomes more and more popular, there's more and more skepticism about what's real, what's authentic. And I think we have to move beyond apologizing for using AI to apologizing for not using AI. The example I always use is, do you ever apologize for using a spell checker? Somebody could come back and say, well, you didn't know how to spell that word. You're cheating. You used a spell check. Nobody would do that, right? People want things that are correctly spelled. Why wouldn't you leverage a tool that can enhance your productivity and your output? Why would you apologize for that, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and for myself, the one of the things I laugh at when I get first drafts of things out of these generative engines is, you know, I don't think we want to word it that way because we're really going to insult the CMO if we use those words, right?
Right, right.
Or, you know, um, you have to understand who you're talking to, and AI doesn't yet get that right. Right.
Yep,
So, I mean, unless you've been super, super clear in your explanation to begin with, which you probably haven't because you're not going to think of everything that could go wrong in the AI's, interpretation.
that's right.
But but I kind of look at it more as a companion, right? It's like, no, I don't really like that because of this, and no, I don't really. And then, it's kind of this iterative thing, unless you're doing design and then forget trying to do iterative design with AI. It is so horrible.
It's terrible.
But yeah, that's don't let your designer go.
No.
So
It's so
so
true. Yeah, that's a great example of an area where I think AI is coming. It's going to get better. I mean, it's going to be the holy grail, I think, when an AI can design a corporate PowerPoint for you, but it's not there today, right? We're all still going to have to slog through that process.
Oh my gosh, I wasted 6 hours. This is, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. It's like, oh my gosh, this is so horrible. And I just
Yes,
wanted AI to work so badly. And
yes,
finally, I'm like, nope, we're going to have to do it the old way.
yep,
So it's just, yeah, it's definitely not there yet.
no,
But for this generative piece, it's great. It's great if you use it in the right way, right? And like you said, you've got to have the 10% on the input and the 10% on the output
yes.
to really leverage it. So another thing that you talk about that I love, Eric, is this AI guilt. You said a little bit about the spell checker, but tell us a little bit about what you see. I almost think that it's, you know, uh, I think we're getting over it a little bit because I think it's becoming so ubiquitous. But what are you saying?
It's funny because people share documents with me all the time, and sometimes you can really tell that they've gone through extraordinary lengths to scrub out all the telltale signs of AI, any emojis or lines, between sections or too many bullet points or
Long
spacing,
dashes.
right? Long dashes, right? And there are times when I look at that. I'll give you an example. I was asked to do a research project the other day on something that I wasn't all that familiar with. And so I had set up a project within Claude, which was the AI I was using for this. And by the way, projects I think are the biggest accelerator in Claude and in ChatGPT because you can give it so much context to what you want to talk about. So I had all the context in for my project, and I literally copied what the request was. And I said, I don't really know that much about this area, but here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Can you help me? And it started spinning away, and it cranked out like a document that was about 6, 7 pages long of really good research of all of these companies that were exactly the kind of companies that I was looking for. But I think to myself, if I had to do that on my own, how would I have done that? I would have had to do a bunch of Google searches, which would have led me down some rabbit holes that weren't very productive. It would have taken me to a lot of sites that I didn't need to go to. It would have been a slow process. Then I would have had to take that information, put it in a spreadsheet or some other kind of document to begin to build this out. And what it did is it gave me, phases for how I can do this. It gave me a project plan for how I could, put this in Asana or some other tool. And it was a great starting point. Now, of course, same kind of thing, right? I have to go through and edit it. Some of the things, I had already been in contact with some of these companies, so they weren't needed on the list. But the amount of time that it saved me
Mhm.
was incredible. And do I now want to go and say, I didn't use AI to do this? I spent, 40 hours putting this whole list together. Well, that would seem kind of foolish if somebody really knows that I could have used AI and done it in an hour,
Mhm.
right? That
Mhm.
almost shows that you're wasting time. And I think
Mhm.
we're getting to that point where rather than feeling guilty about using something, because I think people looked at it and said, well, is this devaluing me? Is this showing that I'm lazy or that I don't have the skills to do this on my own? And I say, no, it's showing the opposite. It's showing you're
Mhm.
leveraging technology to get better outputs and to be more productive, to save time so that you can do other things. And I think that's a mindset shift that's happening, but it's slow. I think everybody's a little leery about it because they're so afraid of being replaced.
Mhm. Yeah, I think, but it's almost a little bit of a paradox here because, the with AI, it's almost like the human expertise is even more important.
That's right.
It's even more important because you have to know enough to know when AI is wrong,
That's right.
right? And that definitely requires expertise because AI can sound so authoritative, right?
Yes.
And then you going, nope, that's wrong.
That's right.
Then, oh, apologies. Well, yeah. So definitely, that critical eye, that last 10% and leveraging it and using the human expertise, I think it is it's even more important when you are leveraging AI, which we started talking about small teams. You can look 10 times your size,
That's right.
right? If you leverage these things effectively. And you can actually keep a smaller team, if you have folks that are using this wisely. And so I think we have to know how to use this wisely. Teams out there have to know how to use this wisely. And I think that's a critical piece of this.
Yeah, and teams need to be given the freedom to learn, to experiment, to try these things. You know, we were talking before about image generation, right? It was about a year ago that if you asked one of these uh, LLMs to generate an image for you that had any text in it, right? Who knows what you'd get back? You wouldn't get a real word back, that's for sure.
Mhm.
It'd be letters all over the place and some crazy symbols. Well, now it's actually doing a fairly decent job of that. It's gotten so much better in the course of a year of generating very realistic images and handling text much better. You pointed to a real problem. It's terrible at iterating though. If you want to make small changes, it just seems to stumble on that. But you know that they're going to get that solved, right? There are tools right now in Google Slides and others where it can say, polish up this slide, make this look better, right? And it'll do it. But it does it as an image, not as separate elements that you can edit. So that's
Mhm.
just a stage in its progression, right? It will get there. And so I think one of the things that discourages people sometimes is they try it and they're like, well, I didn't get the result that I wanted, so I'm just going to go do it the old way. Well,
Mhm.
check back in 2 weeks, try it again. You have to keep learning and seeing what these tools are doing because many of these tools are relying on these underlying LLMs, and each one of those is developing at different paces. And so as they release new functionality, then it takes a little while for them to filter out to all the tools, and bam, all of a sudden functionality can get significantly better. But if you've written it off because you tried it once and you didn't get the output that you wanted, I think you're being short-sighted about how quickly things are changing and how good they're getting.
Yeah, I'm guilty. I got really mad when I was when I was trying to do that presentation. I was like, it's terrible. I'm never using it again.
Yeah.
So guilty is charged, and I think that's good, that's good feedback. I will definitely give it another shot, but I'm going to give it a little time because it was
Yeah.
really, really frustrating. So,
It
but
doesn't happen overnight. Yeah, for sure. But it's moving pretty quick and as far as tech goes.
So give us some real world results. You've done amazing things with some of these companies that you've engaged with. Give us a sense of, when we're applying this, when we're using it correctly. What are some of the kind of results we would expect?
So I can give you something that I've been working on recently, which is I'm working with a company and we're going through a rebranding effort. And so that's complicated, right? It's not only a new name for the company, but it's all the underlying messaging, and then that has to be taken out to the website and then pushed to all this different collateral that needs to be updated for look and feel and messaging and things like that. And one of the things that has just been a game changer is using a tool like Claude to do prototyping that we used to have to do in Figma. So you
Hmm.
used to have to take a designer and go through and work with all of these elements to create pages, and then you'd have review meetings and change this and put a comment on this. And now what you can use is Claude in an interactive way and give it the messaging and say, what's the best way to format this on a web page? And it goes and literally creates a full HTML page for you to look at. Now, it might not be completely polished in the template that you want in the style, but it gives you a quick visual representation of what this might look like. And again, getting back to sort of the white paper versus something that you can respond to kind of
Hmm.
analogy is now all of a sudden leaders can look at this and say, oh, this is bringing this messaging to life. I like how this reads. Following down the page, I can really see how this could resonate more with our target audience than our current messaging and our current website. Then you can take that framework, give it to a designer and say, okay, now polish this up, put this in the right
Hmm.
template, get the right fonts and colors and things like that. But they've already got something that is, again, 80% of the way there. And nobody had to touch any design tool. All this was is just typing things into Claude. And that is a case where you can iterate and say, no, I didn't like that. Can you move this section up here? And you can actually watch it, writing the code and deleting code and things like that. It's spectacular. So the results there are just an incredible speed up in the amount of time that it's taking to do this rebranding. And we're not having to hire an external agency to go through and do all this for us. We're not having to hire external web designers. We're able to do all of this in-house at a much accelerated pace, which is, I don't know what the end result will be in terms of cost savings, but it'll be significant.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's the economics of this is gonna change tremendously.
For sure.
The economics of how we spend our marketing, our precious marketing dollars, right?
Absolutely.
Uh, well, Eric, I've loved the discussion. I always like to end the podcast with kind of a major takeaway, right? So we've talked about, how small teams can act big and generate a great output. But if you're would distill this down for our listeners, what would you say is a big next step they can take?
So I would say every marketing team probably has some toolkit, right? Whether you've got a HubSpot, whether you've got Canva, Asana, whatever it may be, whatever your toolkit, I can guarantee that each one of those tools has AI enabled something.
Hmm.
And as a marketing team, you should be looking at all of this functionality and saying, oh, this is interesting. How could I start to incorporate this in my workflow? And if I did incorporate this and it works as advertised, how would this change our daily work, our productivity, and what if this freed up time, if this thing made things more efficient, what else could we do? And I
Hmm.
think these features are being rolled out so quickly. And we're all familiar with just going to ChatGPT or something and asking it a question, but so much is starting to be embedded in the tools that we use that I don't
Hmm.
think people have a good realization of the capability that they are probably already paying for and are underutilizing. And then
Hmm.
in the tools themselves, have you really figured out how to make the best use of those, right? Are you using projects? Are you uploading the kinds of documents and the instructions into those projects that allow the output to be tailored as close as possible to your brand voice, to your target ICP? Um, if you don't do, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? If you
Hmm.
don't put the right information in, you're not going to get the best information out. So I think there's a lot that teams could do today to begin this path of accelerating and then say, how could I move my team from being content creators to the curators of the content, the
Hmm.
editors of this content?
Fantastic. Eric, you've been great as always. And I'll just let folks know that if you want to learn more about what Eric does, he can be found at fiveechelon.com. And you can check out his show, The Virtual CMO Podcast, where he interviews marketing leaders about building modern marketing organizations. So it's been a great conversation. I'm sure that you and we have a continued conversation coming up as well. And
Looking forward to
appreciate your
that.
time and appreciate you sharing your expertise.
Dana, thank you so much for having me as a guest on the show. I've really enjoyed our conversation today.
Thanks, Eric. Okay, talk to you later.